Hey guys, Darren Carr here, coach of Wise Ocean Pods, and welcome to the moment you've been waiting for. Fantasy is about to kick off for 2025 with the Tigers and Colton going to head in just under 24 hours' time. And we can start locking in players into our teams. So I thought, what better way to celebrate the occasion than to do my final team reveal for the preseason and run through all the players that have come into consideration for me and give you guys my final preseason advice. So let's get into it.
All the pain.
So the time is now. We are on the fantasy website, as we all know and love. We are 23 hours away from kickoff in that first game. So less than 24 hours time now. So what I wanted to do for this team review, I wanted to just go through, start with the locks. I think these guys don't really need too much explanation, and then work my way from there. And then I'll do a bit of a preview of the round as well, just to show you my captains and whatnot. So I guess let's just get straight into it. This is what you guys are here for. So for my locks, straight up, I'll go from the defensive line first. So I'll just change that to defensive line. I have got every player that I have considered as a favourite, so which I will touch on a little bit later on. So my number one lock for the defensive line is Jaden Short. He has been in my side the entire preseason, ever since my first team reveal, even before sort of the game came available. He's always been in my starting side. He's had no injury concerns. We've known of the game style change which Richmond have implemented, and it's going to be a much more of a hold the ball and chip it around a fair bit in the back line. So this is just going to mean he's going to be able to rack up back there, being the main man, particularly with no Daniel Rioli now. It's just his role to take. I can easily see him being a 95 to 100 averaging player. He's already been a 95 sort of player before, so I think he can bump that a bit even further. So he's a lock. He's in pretty much 40% of teams, so there's no turning back for me there. I have no concerns. The other one that is locked back there is Matty Roberts. Already got some cash inbuilt after the round 0 game where he scored 104 against the Hawks there. So he is just locked and loaded in mostly everyone's teams, up to 44% now. So again, probably one I wasn't huge on in the preseason, but he has come into my side in the last couple of weeks with a lot of other options dropping out. And obviously, he looked really good in that game and has in the preseason as well. So he's ticked all the right boxes. And if you're talking about the algorithm that I've built and the way that I like to review players of breakouts and role changes and whatnot, he fits in that game, that algorithm quite nicely. And he's definitely due for a big year this year. To potentially average sort of 90, 95 is where I see him getting to. So that nearly makes him 20 points undervalued there. So he just locked and loaded. The other one that as well is Perryman. Now, Perryman has been in and out of my side a lot of the time in this preseason, but what we saw in the opening round was very, very good. I think he had the 27 disposals, 28 disposals, something like that. He did exactly what I sort of thought he would do when day courses are getting a lot of attention, and he'll be the man to go get the ball. We didn't see a huge amount of tackles from him in that game particularly, but again, going back to that algorithm, it's a club change, it's a role change for him. He's just lighting up the world in that sort of space, so he is definitely going to have a breakout season and definitely going to go increase his average, in my opinion. Now, I guess what's the ceiling for him? I probably see a 95 probably being about the mark where I see him finishing up. So yeah, I think that's 20 points unders. It's great. Just lock him in. I know he has the early buy, as did Roberts, but because we don't have too many of the early buy players now, I don't think it's too much of a concern. And these guys present too much value to be skipping them. Now, that sort of does it for the back line. I'll just move on to the midfield now, and then I'll explain why they're in certain positions after that. So in the midfield, my first lock is Connor Rosie. I know a lot of people are concerned about the injury that he potentially had in the intra-club over the weekend, where apparently he stubbed his toe and had a bit of a toe issue. But I think it was all precautionary. I think the club's come out and said that he's perfectly fine. It was more than just precautionary, just because, Raulmon's so close to starting, and they've already one player down in Butters that they just didn't want to risk it at all. So he is firmly locked in there for me at M2. Obviously, he is very underpriced. He's priced at 97. He is a 105 guy most of the time. He obviously had those injury affected games last season, which were in a hamstring injury. So, for those sort of reasons, he is undervalued, as we all know. So, he is locked in there for me. As a keeper, I think he'll be a keeper for the year. I just hope he can push closer to that 110 sort of average to be a standout midfield player. I'm not 100% sure, but with bit of Butters out, he's going to have a great start to the season and has a very good run as well. The second lock in this lineup is Oliver. He again has been one that has been in my side the entire preseason. I have done so much to try and question why we're picking him, and all the reasons. I've tried to look at all the reasons why I don't want to pick him. With all the relying on him coming back to be this sort of player that he was previously. I've tried my best to be like, no, he may not get back to that Oliver that we've seen in the past, but he hasn't put a foot wrong this preseason. He's training hard. He looked good in the Pracker games, the Community Series games, and scored well in both of those. So, and apparently he's all happy at the club again. So there's no reason why he shouldn't be better than what he was last year, even though it's not much of a role change for him. I just think he can get back to sort of being a 90, 95 sort of averaging player. I don't think his 110s are potentially in his realm again. I think he's still a fair way off of that. So don't think he's just a keeper for the year, in my opinion. So I think he's more of just a cash generator as a mid-pricer. But yeah, I think I really like him there. And for those sort of reasons, he is locked into the side. And I think 54% of the comp agrees with me. So it would be a hard one to fade at this point in time. Next one is my boy, Will Day. Had a breakout game in the opening round where he scored that 129 with 3 goals to his name before half-time. Again, very similar to a few of the other players that's had the opening round. We got a good cheat sheet of looking at him. Negative 11 break even at the moment, so he's going to go up a fair bit in coin. Even if he hits just a 73, he's going to go up roughly 75k, so that shows you how much he's going to make. So I think he's one that you're just going to have to start with. I know a lot of people are concerned about his starting run with getting some attention. Essendon, they may put a Durham on him. That's if he's playing in the midfield. I don't see much of a tag coming from Carlton, just because, Chincotta isn't quite fit at the moment, and I don't think he will be for this game, so it'll be interesting to see there. Whereas Giants, I definitely do see a bit of attention with Bedford. So my way of thinking about Day is that I'm going to start him. He's going to make some decent cash, potentially 100k in the first 2 or 3 weeks. Then you can assess at the round 4 buy and be like, okay, is he copping too much attention? What's his run like? Is there more attention to come? His run after the buy is actually pretty good as well. So I'm not 100% saying it's certain that I'll be trading him out at round 4. There's definitely a potential that, okay, he's still traveling quite well. I still think he can bump up his price tag to a 95 here and there, and especially with a decent run after the buy, that I'd keep him. So if you don't like what he's seeing, then you can jump off at his buy and you can take that 100k that he's made. I just think he's a bit of a cheat code. He's one that we've been looking at all the preseason, so I'm locking him in there. Now, I won't lock in any rookies at this point in time. I'm just purely looking at mid prices and sort of, I guess, not even value. Premium options. I think premium options are very to and fro. You can pick any one that you really like because you're pretty much paying up for what you're going to get. So we'll move into the ruck line, which I think there's no difference here. It is Tom de Koning. Without Pitnet for the first 3 to 4 weeks, or if not even longer, he's just going to absolutely kill it. He has shown that he can be a 105 averaging player in that role. Particularly last year, I think he had 8 or 9 games where he played a solo ruck and he averaged at 102, 103. So the only question mark is if he can stay fit in that role, because he did have a lot of injury concerns last year in this role. So for those reasons, he's very underpriced. He has a pretty soft run to start the season as well, so there should be no reason why he doesn't get off to an absolute flyer, and I think you have to start him there. And finally, the forward line. We all know who the players are. We'll just throw them in here real quick. I'll probably just do this a lot easier. McRae, Smith, Daniel, and I've thrown Garcia in there as well as a must-have, I think, in my opinion, or a lock. He looks like he is primed for a breakout. He's super underpriced. He's been by far the third midfielder for St Kilda all preseason, and that's the way that's just going to be for them at this point in time, in my opinion. So I just don't see that changing. There are some question marks with obviously Sinclair coming back. Does he take a midfield role or does he play halfback? That's to be seen, and I don't think it's gonna. Well, it's gonna push him back to the fourth midfielder, right? But which I don't think is gonna be that drastic. He's priced at 41. I still think he can bump up his average to a 60, even if it's in that the fourth midfielder role. So those reasons, I'm just willing to take the punt. The run to start the season is pretty good. Adelaide Crows, Geelong, and then the Tigers as well. If he's not going well, then I can look to jump off if I'm not too keen. So I really like him there. Obviously, the 3X dogs, probably don't need to talk about them too much, but McRae looks solid as the full-time midfielder at St Kilda. He's an absolute lock. Same with Daniel in that halfback role. He's going to absolutely kill it at that cheap price. Bailey Smith is probably the only one that is borderline a lock for me because we haven't seen a huge amount from him in the preseason. And what we saw in that Pracker game wasn't necessarily, mind-blowing in the sense. He played a lot of wing with some midfield time. It wasn't like a full-time midfield role that we were sort of expecting. So there are some question marks there for him. So if you're looking to fade someone, I could go with a Bailey Smith. But I think with the ownership, obviously at 70%, and the price tag being at 58 for a guy that has gone, close to 100, if not 95 previously, I think it's too hard to pass up. This, I've had some discussions with other people previously, and to reference it back to my fantasy winning year in 2023, where I faded a Josh Dunkley when we had those 4 or 5 premium forward options that we just lock and loaded in the starting of the year, where I faded a Josh Dunkley. I think this is a very different scenario because these guys are so much cheaper. Yes, there are locks, but they're not the same category where Josh Dunkley came in and priced at like 110. Yeah, that's the reason why I faded him. I didn't think he had much upside in that point of view. Whereas there's obvious upside in Bailey Smith. So I've just locked him into my side here, but I can see the reason why people are potentially looking at fading him. So that's the locks in my opinion. It is potentially half the side, so please feel to correct me if you think I've got something wrong there, but this is pretty much how I see most teams lining up, maybe besides the likes of Garcia and Will Day potentially being on the out of that there. Now we will go from the forward line up, just because I think most of the defensive line is where most of our differences are when it comes to our team structure. I think most of our forward line is pretty straightforward. I think most people are just slotting Riley Sanders in there as part of that sort of main 5 group. All for the same sort of reasons that he's going to have a lot of midfield time to start the season, particularly with Bont and Treloar out of the side. He will be that 3rd or 4th midfielder behind the likes of Livatore and Richards, and then you can throw in a Matt Kennedy who may be that 3rd or 4th guy alongside A. Sanders. So he's going to have a big midfield role to start the season. I think he can average 80 there. Up against North Melbourne to start the season. Then got Collingwood. So it's not a terrible run to start the season, but it's not also the greatest. I just think he is a natural accumulator of the ball, and he's done everything right in the preseason to tick all the boxes, and he's sort of just all fallen his way that he's going to be a good option for us. Priced at 64, I think he can easily bump that up to an 80 to start the season. Again, he's not going to be a keeper. He's more of a cash generator to start the season. And then we'll look to jump off as, more players start to come back, particularly Bontempelli. I know Adam Treloar is probably a little bit further away than that. So keep that in mind, but there's that one. At my F1, I have gone Jason Horne-Francis, and I guess the toss-up is whether you go Jason Horne-Francis or a Rankin is where most people are going. I am deciding to pay up for a Horne-Francis just because I think I'm more comfortable with him, with his accumulative ability. We haven't really seen much of a Rankin to be that main accumulator of the ball. Yes, he's a very high impactful player. Both of these guys are, but and obviously Rankin's getting that midfield role, but so is Horne-Francis going to get a much more CBA midfield role with Butters out particularly. So it's going to be a much more condensed midfield rotation with those four guys in there. So I'm more comfortable with a Horne-Francis, and I think he can bump his up average to being a 95-ish to maybe even 100, particularly to start the season. The run's really good for both of those players, so it's really just paying up whether you want an extra 100k or not. There's a world where I could drop down to a Rankin if I need that extra 100k here and there, depending on what happens. But for now, I particularly like Port's run, and I think he's probably more secure in that midfield group, whereas Adelaide have a lot more guys that can run through that midfield, and he could spend more of the time forward here and there. So there's a reason for I like Horne-Francis. He's going to be a lock for top 6 for the year, in my opinion. Rankin could be there or thereabouts, but he's not no certainty. Moving into the ruck line, it is up to 2 blokes, in my opinion. It is up to either Cherry or Gawn. I'm pretty confident in playing up for one of these guys. It's just really which one I want to pay up for. I'm not looking at Marshall, even though he is set to go for round 1. And there is a world where you could do it if you're really bullish on him or you want to be a bit different. He is much less owned than these two. And he does have much more of a favorable run than these two, but I'm just not 100% certain with obviously a lot of talk around Harry Boyd, which I might as well slot in at R3 at this point in time, that he may spend some more time forward. So for those reasons, I'm not looking at starting him. I want to see what happens start of the season. But who am I starting at R1? And at the moment, it is Cherry. Even though there is a tough run, both of these guys have tough runs. I think he gets off to a pretty good one against English. And I think he just generally has more opportunity to take his game to a new level. We sort of saw that towards the back end of the last season, where he was just absolutely dominant. And I think he's going to be much more consistent ruck. Whereas Max Gawn relies more of the ball around the ground and doesn't do a lot of tackle work. He gets more marks around the ground, whereas a Cherry, he's predominantly known for doing a lot of tackle work in the midfield, and then he's sort of added that next level to his game where he's able to mark around the field as well. So for those reasons, I think I'm just more confident with a Cherry being that sort of top 2 ruck for the year, and I'm just locking that in from the start to finish, and he'll be a captain option to start the season. Into the midfield, there are a plethora of options that we need to look at here, and you can see the host of lineups that I've got favorited, which is all the players that have essentially ticked my box in my algorithm to be like, okay, these players have done everything they can in the preseason to get a position in my side. So it's really just deciphering which ones I want to go with. So at my M1, I am locking in Dawson. I just think he's a great captain option to start the season. And I will run through what my captain options are looking like through the early rounds. But as a spoiler alert, he is in a lot of those calculations with their early run. I can show you that a bit here. St Kilda, Essendon, North Melbourne, Suns, and Geelong, first 5. Can show you pretty easily that he should go very well to start the season. I do think he is slightly underpriced at 105. I think he can easily push back up to his 112 from 2023. The only concern, I guess, for a lot of people is that there's a lot of guys that can run through that midfield, and there's potential that he could be pushed forward at sometimes, and he has come out and said that. But I don't think it's going to be that detrimental that he's going to be a stay-at-home forward and he's going to have, half the game up there. I think he's going to have the flexibility to float wherever he wants because he is such a good user of the footy. The team wants the ball in his hand and he wants to be the one delivering it into the forward 50 there. So I really like what he can do. I think he's going to get up to an absolute flyer to start the season and be a good captain option. So there's that one. Obviously, I've locked these 3 away. So then we're looking at some more mid-priced options here. And I have, like I said, looked through a lot of options. I'm pretty bullish on Chera, so I would like to pay out for him, but currently I don't have the money for him. Peatling's been on my side pretty much the entire preseason, but I have just locked in Hollands at M5 at this point in time. Obviously, the role change at Colton there going to the halfback role. He's up against the Tigers to start the season. I think he can get off to an absolute flyer. And we have seen what that halfback role can be, particularly because Newman's out as well. And there's no Doherty back there because Doherty is going to be playing predominantly wing. So there's just so many points that are available to Hollands at this point in time. And I've liked what I've seen in the preseason. So price at 62, I easily see that being an 85 to a 90. And that's probably on the low end of what he could do. So I'm pretty bullish in there, and obviously that's nearly 30 points of value, so you can't ignore that too much. The next guy is O'Driscoll. He is been firmly locked in my side since I've seen what I saw in the practice game. I think it was the All Stars game there against All Stars against Freo. He just absolutely lit it up. He looks like he's going to have a breakout season, and particularly that Young and Pfeiffer out to start the season. He is going to be running through that midfield, so it's sort of a role change for him. So he's going to be playing a lot of midfield and a lot of wing at the same time. So a bit of inside and outside ball. He's shown he's been able to do that, and he's a very impactful player. So looks like he's broken into the best 22 for them, and he's just locked in my side at the 43 price tag. I think he can easily push that to a 75, if not an 80, playing it on that inside a little bit more here and there. So run to start the season, Geelong obviously is a very nice matchup. Sydney is a bit tougher, but at Optus Stadium could be very nice, particularly for wingers. Obviously, West Coast are very nice. Bulldogs can be quite nice as well. So I'm actually quite bullish on what his run to start the season is. There's obviously a lot of Brayshaw as well. So yeah, load him in. This next pick is probably a little bit on the haymaker side, and that is Mitch Nevitt. And again, it is because I'm running quite deep in a lot of my lines. You can see I don't have a rookie in my forward line at this point in time, and I'm only going to run one rookie in my midfield. So that is Mitch Nevitt at my M7. And again, he hasn't put a foot wrong all preseason. He's only played 4 games last season, but with the likes of, Dangerfield looking to play a lot more forward, Tanner Bruin is injured currently, so he's not going to be in that midfield. So I'm looking at that midfield for Geelong, and I'm looking at, Holmes, potentially Bailey Smith. Stewart may run through there a little bit here and there, but that's not guaranteed. Then the only other options they really have is a Jack Bowles and a Tom Atkins. So it'll be interesting to see what their lineup looks like. This is probably one I could be scared off of when it comes to team announcements, and I do have my backup plans, which I will show you. But I do think he is due for a breakout year. He's shown that he has plenty of scoring potential in those pracky games. I think he scored both 70s in those games, playing a mostly midfield role. So I think he is quite set to do well there. Priced at 42, you can't really go too wrong. Run to start the season, it's not bad. It's not terrible, not great, but it's enough when you priced at 42. You can't really go too wrong. So I do like him there. He is only 4% owned, so it is a bit more on the riskier side, but you've got to have these differential players in your side to make a bit of a jump to start the season if you want to do particularly well. If you want to, fight for Hilux or whatnot, you think you do need to have some differences in your side. Not too many that you're running the risk and it could destroy your season, but you need to have some to make that difference point of view, not just to start with a vanilla side and try and win it from there, because that's what a lot of people will be doing, and it's not always easy just to trade your way to the top, because it can only take a few mistakes and you're out of luck. And then for my rookies, I should just probably start filling out some of the benches. So O'Sullivan and Ashcroft are the guys that I have at M8 and M9, and these two will sort of rotate between each other based on their matchup. So I'll probably start with O'Sullivan against Western Bulldogs in round 1, just because he is going to be playing a lot of wing time, but he is going to probably spend some time on the halfback as well. And we all know that Western Bulldogs do give up a fair bit of points to the halfback position. So I just prefer that one there rather than an Ashcroft who is up against Sydney. I think it's just a bit more of a tougher matchup. And there's no certainty that he's going to get that primary midfield role. Obviously, they've got a host of talent already in there with Neil, Dunkley, McCluggage, and his brother Will Ashcroft already being the main 4 in there. So he's not going to have a huge amount of time in there. And they already have Arena who runs through the midfield as well. So I'm not super confident that he's going to be named and be best 22, but he's going to be there or thereabouts. I'll just have to assess if he's going to be the sub or not, whether he starts my side. And I guess that's probably where I should say the rookies are obviously subject to if they are named or not. Now, Caparelli, if that's how you pronounce it, it does make it into my side as well. He is just on the utility. He is already named which for the Colton Blues because then their team has already been announced for tomorrow. So that is good to see. He's on the wing, so he's going to be a good cash generator for us at that basic price. Against Tigers should go pretty well, so I think he gets off to a good one there. And the other one I have currently is Hugh Boxhill. Not certainly locked into my side again. If he's not named in the St Kilda's team, then obviously that I'll look elsewhere, and that will probably go up to the likes of a Murphy Reed, if I can find him, not in the options. Murphy Reed, he looks like he's potential to be named for Fremantle as a debut, so he probably slots in there for me at Boxhill's suspense. So yeah, just to quickly go back to the forward line rookies, and I don't think it's any sort of surprise. It is Davidson and Stone. I think that's pretty much most people's bench options. People are talking about Davidson being a fieldable option. I'm not super confident on that option. Again, he is a winger, so it is going to be very up and down for his scoring ability. But he is up against North to start the season, so I could see that one being quite nice at round one. But from there, I probably wouldn't do that from there. So for now, I'm locking them two on the bench option. Just a quick touch on Connor Stone. He is a lock to be best 22 for GWS. Obviously has that cash inbuilt in him with a negative 20 break even from round 0. Scored the 50. He's just going to make a bit of coin to start the season. So locking him in there on the bench, that's a nice one to lock in. On to the defense, and this is where it sort of gets a little bit interesting for most people because it does very much differentiate between a lot of what people are doing. So looking at all the options that I've considered, obviously you got two top guys that I particularly like, going Sheasel or Azorko, and I don't disagree with starting either one of them. I haven't started them in my side just because I don't have the cash for them, and I have spent my cash elsewhere to go a little bit deeper inside in certain lines just because I'm not confident with some rookies. But the guy I have at D3 is Miles Bergman, and he's probably not someone a lot of people are talking about at the moment. He is only 2.5% owned, but he is looking like he's got a much more improved role, a bit more responsibility back there in the Port Adelaide defensive line. In both the Pracky game and the Community Series game, he was pretty much the number one scorer back there for them. He reminds me a lot of a James Sicily, where he is an intercepting defender, but he's also the distributor for them, particularly with Houston out. So I think he's very underpriced at that 75. I think he can easily push 95 in that role. He's got the flexibility of a great overhead mark and also a very lethal kick. So they want to keep the ball in his hands. The run to start the season is there, so he is the one potentially I'm just locking in, and he's going to be my risky pick for the year. I've liked what I've seen. He's ticked every box, so I can't ignore that and just play it safe. So I really like what he's going to do. At D5, I have gone with Fraser at this point in time. I think he's obviously it's the second year coming into the AFL system. Only 19 years old. We saw what he did last year where he averaged 61. Sorry, I do think he can push 80, and he's obviously been massive in the practice games without Dale. It's just if Dale is named, then there is a potential that I don't start him, but I do still think he can average closer to 70, if not 80, if he's going to be that second distributor off halfback. Just reading how he played in the bracket games, he was commanding the ball from his teammates. They were willing to give it to him to be that distributor off halfback. Obviously, there's no JJ back there for the start of the season, I think for the first half of the season. Obviously, Daniel's been moved out of that side over the practice game, over the preseason as well. And obviously Dale's very much under an injury cloud. So if he hasn't started there, then I'll definitely start a Fraser. I will run through some of my backups if doesn't happen, and I'm not 100% sure what happens with teams. Then I may look to move him on and try somewhere else. But at my D6, I have spent up and I have gone to Sam de Koning as well. Now, I know a lot of people are scared off of him at the moment, but I am pretty confident that he is going to play a 55 to 60% ruck role at Geelong this year. We've seen that in the practice game, and we had seen it towards the back end of last season. The only caveat to this again is if in the team announcement is that if Stanley is in the team, then obviously I'm not starting him. That's pretty straightforward, and I will downgrade him to another option. But I think he is very high risk, high reward sort of player, especially playing for Geelong. If we've seen him be able to average 85, 90 in this ruck role in the 5 games that he played last year. So he is potentially 35 points of value in that role. So it is very high risk, high reward. But I'm willing to start at the start of the season. He's especially because his start from the season, particularly against Liam Reedy, he's going to get off to an absolute flyer. I think it's pretty much locked in that he's going to be playing against him and Luke Jackson, obviously, as the backup. So he should go very well in that game. And I can easily see him popping a 85 to 90 there quite comfortably. Roll Marshall's a bit tougher, but he's a bit underdone, so who knows what's going to happen there. Oscar McInerney, not easy as well, and then obviously next gone. So it's not a great run this season, but I just think with that cash generation from round 1, he could get off to a pretty good one, and I just want to lock him in. And at the end of the day, if I don't like what I see and the role's not quite secure, then I could just downgrade him to a prior, obviously, or someone else that I'm looking at. I'm not starting a prior at this current time, so he's probably the obvious option I would drop down to if I like what I see from him. And there is another option in a Sam Taylor that's, again, I did speak about a little bit in the last video. Obviously, he's got a lot of cash generation already built in with a negative 51 break even, which I didn't actually believe this is real, but apparently it is. So he is potentially going to make over 100k round 1. So it has been something I have toyed with to start him in my side. I'm just not confident that he's going to be one I want on field because the end of the day, he averages 50, so he often drops 30s and 40s in your side. So I could easily see him dropping a 40 next week, particularly against Melbourne. He scored a 30 against them last year, so I'm not super confident on him scoring well, even though he's going to have some cash generation. But again, if I'm not confident on a Fraser or a Sam de Koning when teams come out, then he's probably the guy I downgrade one of those guys to. And just bank that cash generation and then look to jump off him when I see, if a prior goes off in round 2 or something like that. Zach Reed is also slotting into my bench option. I think 230k can't really go too wrong there. And then Trainer is my D7 spot. Obviously locked in for tonight. I think he goes well. He's shown he's definitely got some scoring capacity to him. Being a defender at Richmond is obviously only going to help him a lot more with the ball spending a lot of time back there. He scored 48 in the second half of the practice match where he came onto the side. So he's definitely got some scoring potential to him, and I just think he's one of the more locked in players. Yes, we're paying up that extra 50k, but he's got the job security back there. So I really like what he's going to bring. He'll be an emergency on the Thursday night, tomorrow night. So that is the team currently. So quickly just summarizing why I've picked them in terms of my categories. So, and that those categories are either club change, role improvement, injury affected games, or coming back from a long-term injury, or just natural improvement. So Jaden Stewart is probably outside of those categories. It's probably a better one to start with, but he's probably more of a game style shift in my opinion. Matty Roberts is a role change and just natural improvement in that second role. Miles Bergman is I need to bring it up on here. It is role change and role improvement, obviously just with more responsibility. Harry Perriman is club change and role change, so that's just probably one of the easiest ones to lock in. Fraser, role change, natural improvement. Sam De Koning is a role change, going to that ruck line. Sorry, this is really bad. Dawson, he is a captain option, but he also has an improved role. Rosie, he's got the improved role with Butters out and also coming back from injury, so that affects his price. Oliver, I've listed as an injury affected game. Obviously, the mental issues is an injury, so that's that. Day, obviously coming back from injury affected games from last year. Ollins, role change. O'Driscoll, role improvement, role change, and a bit of a breakout year. Mitch, because Nevitt is a breakout year. Not doing rookies because obviously they're just breakout years pretty much. Cherry is just one I'm paying up for as a captain option, and he's going to be top 2 ruck line. Tom De Koning is role change. Horn Francis is improved role. The Bulldogs boys, the ex-Bulldog boys are all pretty much club change and role change. Sanders is improved role and changed role. And Garcia is breakout season and a role change as well. So if you're looking at those sort of categories, that's sort of my algorithm to way that I think I can see them breaking out this year. So just to give you some background on that one. Now, one thing I wanted to really go through is summarizing what's been going on. So the way I look at my team, where are my risks? Who are my keepers? So my risks pretty much are, so obviously besides the locks, Miles Bergman is obviously a bit of a risk. Obviously he is very lowly owned, so if he goes badly, then that affects me only. So if I don't like what I see come round 1, which he should go well in, then he's got Collingwood. We obviously seen what GWS did to Collingwood last week or on the weekend in round 0. So I think he's going to go quite well. But if he doesn't, I've got the fail safe that he's got the Tigers next week up. So I think he just is one that I can lock in for that game as well. Again, 2-game sample size. If I don't like what I see, then I jump off him then. So there's the risk one there. The 2, Fraser and Sam De Koning. If I don't like either of them, like I said, I do have Pryor to jump back onto if I want to trade either of those out. And Sam Taylor is another fullback option if I don't want to start either one of those. So there's those risks. In the midfield line, I've got Dawson as a keeper for the year. Same with Rosie at this point in time. I think is a keeper if he can bump up his average to about that 105. Oliver, I don't think is much of a risk. I think he's guaranteed underpriced value. Same with Dave with his built-in value. Hollins, I don't see there being too much of a risk to him realistically. I just think he's guaranteed to go up in terms of value. It's just a matter of how much. I think at a minimum he's going to be closer to that 80 average. Hope he can getting that a lot closer to 90 in that very, very nice role. So I don't think there's too much risk there. It's really just these 2 boys I really think are potentially in issues. Obviously, O'Driscoll, I'm pretty confident that he's best 22, but Fremantle are a very good side, so there is potential that he does have some job security issues, and there is potential that he could be used as a sub if things aren't going his way. So there is some risk there. And same with Mitch Nevitt, but I do obviously, if they are working, then I'm just downgrading them to a rookie and then running some rookies on the field, which hopefully put their hand up in round 1 to be fieldable options for us. Whether that's an Ashcroft comes in and looks like he's not going to be the sub, Murphy Reed if he looks good on there as well. There's going to be some rookies that put their hands up that we are going to be able to select. So there's my fail-safe options there. Mitch Nevitt as well. Obviously, if he's not named, I won't start him. But if he plays and his name's in the right position and I lock him in, if he doesn't go well in round 1, I'd be very surprised if he doesn't improve on his average at 42. It'd just be very surprising if he does. If he's playing in that midfield role, it just doesn't seem logical to me. But if he doesn't go well, then I can just downgrade him to a rookie as well. Real no concerns in the ruck line. No matter how bad Cherry starts the season, I'm not going to look to jump off of him. I'm not going to make that mistake 2 years in a row. I'm just going to lock in these ruck pigs and just let them run. Tom De Koning will be one that I will run probably for the first 4 to 5 weeks. I would like to see him run all the way through to round 7, and then it starts to get a bit tougher from there. But obviously, with Pitnet due back in 4 to 6 weeks, if he is named, then I will have a force trait at that point in time. But I will then jump from him to the likes of either Marshall or Max Gorn, depending on which one of those guys are looking like they're going to be top 2 ruckman. There is potential that I could go to the likes of a Briggs, who will be underpriced at that stage. Could even look at a Sam Darcy if he comes back from injury before then as well. But I don't want to mess around in the ruck line too much this year, to be honest. I'd rather just take the cash generation we're going to get from De Koning and then just jump straight up to the top dogs and just run them for the rest of the year. So, but we'll assess that as the season goes on. So really no risk in the ruck line there for me. And then you've got the forward line. I think the only risk I potentially see is Garcia, obviously with Sinclair coming back. I've spoken about that previously. Bailey Smith, if he doesn't have the right role, I still think he'll be a 75 averaging player, even if he's playing full-time wing. So he's still underpriced, so I don't think that's too much to worry about there. Riley Sanders is priced a bit high, and if he doesn't get off to a good start to the season, then he could be one that we shuffle on pretty quickly. And there's probably a few other options that we could look at in that forward line, particularly that are a bit cheaper. Just haven't, probably not just there, but you got a Savani that I'm keeping a close eye on tomorrow night, Thursday night. He's cheap. Reef McGuinness is another one as well. All priced around that 400k. So there's options to go back there that we are well and truly know of. So there's options to go there. So there's the risks. I guess in terms of keepers, I have, just like I said, Dawson, Rosie, Cherry being the main 3. Horn Francis will be a keeper. I'm banking that McRae will be a keeper because I think he will average 100 this year. And I've also got Caleb Daniel as a keeper as well. So I have 6 keepers in my starting side, which is probably a bit less than some other players, some other coaches, but I'm taking a bit more risk on. Only running the 1 rookie on field, which is probably 1 less than most other teams. Most other teams I've seen, they're either starting with a Sam Davidson at F6, or they're running, a Levi Ashcroft as in part of that midfield rotation alongside Finn O'Sullivan. So I feel like I'm taking a lot of the risk off of those rookies and putting them onto the mid prices that have a bit more upside and a bit more job security. So there's the reasoning for that, realistically. Now, one thing I wanted to do is go into captain options. So captain options for me, I think it's pretty obvious. I've got 3 guys that I've pretty much paid up for in Cherry, Dawson, and Rosie. So that's probably where I'm going to be looking for most of the start of the season. So round 1, it's hard to go past going Cherry against English. He scored a 129 against him last year, so I think that's a pretty good starting zone. I probably won't have a VC option to go with because I am looking to start with 30 green dots. So if Harry Boyd is named, I will absolutely be starting him in the R3 spot. If he isn't named and that we do have the luxury of having a VC option, I'm probably still bullish on starting with a Boyd at that R3 option because there's probably more potential that he comes in at some point in the season, because there has been a lot of talk around that, so it's a lot more likely rather than starting with a Livingstone, which I know a lot of other people are looking at, just being that VC loop for the year. I don't want to lock off the potential of having that cash generation on the bench there, because there's every chance that he could come in, round 2, round 3. And I still think they play a lot of the later games, so I can still use him as a VC option later on in the line, particularly with round 2, 3, 4 having bye players. I have VC options instantly, so I'm pretty bullish on starting 30 green dots. But if I do have the luxury of having a VC option in round 1, I will just be putting the VC on Cherry and then going into Dawson, who has St Kilda. So that is a very nice matchup. We saw what Rosie was able to do to them in the practice game. Not saying that that's always that's going to go, but that looks like a very juicy matchup. Round 2 will be pretty interesting. So I've got Dawson against Essendon. that will be quite nice. Otherwise, I have Rosie against the Tigers, which obviously will be a very nice matchup, so I could probably go a VC on him there. Other than that, Cherry has gone, so I probably won't look at that one too much. Round 3, Rosie has Essendon. So again, we'll be wait and see on how they go, but previously they have been quite a nice matchup. An interesting one I could go for round 3 would be a Macrae against the Tigers. And this is not even considering, the likes of DeConing. Like he's shown that he could be a potential captain option, scoring 130 last year in this role. So probably not banking him in just yet. I'd probably go a VC option if anything. But also Horn Francis could be another one, but I'm probably always going to go Rosie over Horn Francis in that perspective. Probably not looking at many other options here and there. Not pushing Oliver to be a captain option. Round 4 is pretty obvious. Rosie against St Kilda. Again, what he did in the practice game would be pretty nice. Other than that, it would be Dawson in against Gold Coast Suns. Yes, it is away from home, but I still think it could go very well there. They are quite a nice matchup. And then in round 5, when we come out of the buys, it does get a little bit more tricky, but Dawson does have the likes of the Cats. So again, nice matchup. Other than that, we have Tom DeConing, who has West Coast Eagles against Bailey Williams. He went 105 against him only 2 years ago when he did play a bit of ruck. Other than that, it is potentially a Caleb Daniel who has Gold Coast Suns. So it is a bit thin on that line, but the obvious option, I guess, that I will look to trade in that time would either be a Brayshaw or a Sarong. They do have the Tigers in that matchup, so hopefully by that stage we're in a good position that we can look to start making some upgrades and getting those more expensive guys in to be more captain options. So that's the first 5 rounds. So I'm pretty confident in my captain options at the start of the season. I do highly encourage you to do the same sort of research with your captain options, because you don't want to come into a game and be struggling with captain options, because again, captains do make a huge difference when it comes to points on field to start the season. But what are the alternatives that I've looked at in terms of my starting structure in my starting position? So obviously we have a lot of issues with the back line. Like that's probably where we have the most struggles when it comes to value. So I have looked at, getting rid of a Dawson and then paying up for the likes of a Zorko. I'll just do that here real quick for you guys. And then throwing him at my D1, just paying up in that line, and then, running these risky guys a bit down lower, but reducing the amount of risk. And that's really just freeing up a little bit more money in the midfield. And then I'd probably go with the likes of a Chera in the midfield. He's probably the one guy that I am not starting at this point in time that I'm quite confident on. But I just don't have the money at this point in time to be able to slot him in. So this is another structure that I've looked at. Obviously, Boxall is subject to if he's named. Otherwise, he would go up to a read, as I've said. So this is another structure that I've looked at. So I'm pretty locked into my structure. I don't really want to entertain running too many rookies on field. I'm not confident with many others. I'm just probably the reason why I lean towards the likes of Dawson more than I do a Zorko is just the fact that I think he's more of a captain option for the first couple of weeks, particularly when it's critical when we don't have many captain options. Against Sydney, I think he cops a bit of attention from the likes of Haywood or James Jordan in that forward line, so he could get off to a bit of a slower start. Against West Coast could definitely be quite nice. Again, these games I have no doubts he'll be quite nice, but you do have the VC loop, so that's a bit of a telltale sign. Against the Bulldogs should be a nice matchup as well, with them giving up a fair few points to the back line as well. So I'll probably just lean towards Dawson in that sense. He's cheaper, whereas Zorko is probably paying up for what you're going to get and probably not much more than that. So looking at the value side of things a little bit more than just paying up for Zorko there. So I'll put that back to where it was. But looking at the other options, I guess, is the other option I wanted to look at. So you can see all my favorited options that I've got here. So Sicily spent a lot of time on my side, only came out of in the opening round just now that he's a little bit under his break even, so I'll just wait and see if he can be a breakout player for us later on. Home spent a lot of time in my preseason as well, just with spending a bit more time in midfield, but Geelong does worry me a fair bit, so he has been removed from the side. I just don't know if I see the upside as very much upside in the Geelong system, so avoiding him for now. Danioli is one that, if he played a lot more of the Pracky game, could definitely have been in my side, but he's one that I'm just going to watch for the first week to see how he goes, and then obviously after his bye, I may pick him up after that stage if he shows that he's clearly value and going to be a really good option back there for us. Bergman I've spoken about, obviously, and Pryor as well. Have toyed with him being my D6, but I'm just not super confident. He's been in the system for 4 or 5 years at Brisbane, and he hasn't really shown a ceiling, averaging around 45 to 50. So, not super confident with him just yet, but I can see him easily having a pretty good game, and then I can jump on him at that cheaper price of under 400k still. So, watching him there. The mids is where it does get pretty interesting. Obviously, a plethora of options. Like I said, I'll quickly throw him in there and get my team back to the way it was. So Petrarca obviously only played the one practice game. I would have loved to see him play in that other practice game because, yeah, then he would have been much more in my calculations. But only one practice game under his belt, it does raise some concerns. Otherwise, but he did look amazing in that game, and I can not stop anyone from trying to pick him. The benefit of picking Petrarca is that he could potentially be a keeper for the year because he has averaged 105 previously, and there is a chance that he could pick up forward status at some point in time. While it's unlikely, there's definitely potential because they are running a bit more of a deeper midfield with the likes of Langford and Rivers spending a bit more time in there alongside Viney and Oliver. And obviously they've got a couple of rookies that are coming through that may spend time in there. So don't mind a Petrarca, but again, I don't have the cash to start him. Tom Powell hasn't put a foot wrong. He has spent a bit of time in my side, but he has made his way out, particularly because I looked at the injury report and I saw that, what's his name? George Wardlaw isn't far away. He's only 4 to 6 weeks away, so you're only going to get that small sample size, whereas I thought it would probably be a lot more closer to half the season, so would have been a bit more beneficial. I think I already have too many of those guys that are only in for a very short period of time, that adding another risk in that sense would be too risky. So I've avoided him for now. Finn Callahan obviously had that breakout game in the opening round without 110. With Tom Green out for still with potentially a week or so, I'm just fading him there just because I'm not sure he's going to be one that has massive amount of upside. I still think he can be a 90 player, but not much more than that. I just don't know if he has the accumulative abilities or the easy stuff, like I've said, the marks and tackles to do extremely well and be 100 averaging player. So I'm not starting him there. Schultz scares me just because he's at a very high price, and I am concerned when Redmond's in the side, he doesn't score as well. So I don't think he presents too much upside, priced at 95 already, so avoiding him. Chera, I do think he can go 95, and I do like his run to start the season, so he is one that I would like to start, but I just can't. Peatling, again, probably playing as that fifth midfielder at Adelaide, and there's probably 6 guys that can run through that midfield at Adelaide, so I'm just avoiding him there. He can spend a bit more forward time, so there's the midfield, and then you've got the forward line. I don't have too many other guys I like, particularly at that lower rank at this point in time. Myers was a surprising one in the algorithm to really pop up. He looked excellent in those practice games, and looks like he's taking his game to a new level. Just looks like he's someone that the team looks for whenever they get the opportunity because he is such a good ball user. So as a forward option, he could be a bit of a smoky pick if you want to go there. He's 3% owned. I couldn't do it, especially when you're looking at ranking at that cheaper price with an obvious role change. But he's definitely another option there for you. And my backup plans, as I said, could be if Dale's named and Fraser doesn't look like to be that guy, then I could just go with a Sam Taylor here instead. I don't know why I don't have him as a favourite at this point in time, and just banking on that cash generation for the first week, and then assessing, okay, is Pryor that option? I jump down to him. Other than that, if a never isn't named, then another smoky pick that I am potentially looking at a very similar price is the likes of a Macintosh. Now, he's not someone that I'd highly recommend for many other players. He is extremely pottish, but he is named as the inside midfielder for the Tigers tomorrow night's game, and it's a role change that we saw in the practice games, particularly in the community series. We saw it a little bit in the practice game where in the final quarter he had 4 CBAs and he had like a 26-point quarter. And then in the community series game, he scored 108. Probably went a little bit under the radar in that game from 30 disposals. And that was alongside the likes of Taranto, Hopper. He was played as that sort of third midfielder alongside the likes of Taranto, Hopper, and Ross was sort of that third and fourth midfielder. So I do think he's going to play that role, and there's a bit of a role change there for him to have that bit of a stable head in there. So price at 43 as an inside midfielder. Yes, at the Tigers isn't great, but I do think he has the upside to him there. So if the likes of Never isn't named or isn't named in the right role, then this is probably my break safe sort of, however the saying goes. I can't actually know it right now, but he's probably the option I go to instead of that option. So, and that's probably the only changes that I'd make to my side realistically. I don't think there'll be too many others. Like I said, rookies will change. So that's the team announcement. That's the team reveal. Hopefully I haven't confused you guys too much, and hopefully you guys don't screw me in the comments too much, because I do feel quite confident in this team. There's some difference here and there that I am quite confident in, and not being too vanilla, but it is quite very similar to a lot of other teams that I have seen. Now it is time to do a quick round one preview. Sorry, I'm getting confused with my rounds at the moment, but just quickly looking through the teams that were announced for tomorrow night, Thursday night. So I guess the notable things that I mentioned here is that Blight was named in the halfback for Richmond. So if you're keen on him at 400k in the defensive line, he could be an option. Short on halfback, Trainer in the halfback, named on field is also good to see. Macintosh, like I said, named in the midfield is potentially an option if you're bullish like me. Lawler was named as well, so if you're looking to pay up for him, he could probably has a 50-50 split in the midfield, so he probably plays as that fifth midfielder for them. I'm not super bullish on it just because I don't think he's going to score very well, particularly if he's going to play a lot of forward time. Obviously, it's not going to spend a lot of time in there, so I'm not doing that. Besides that, there's probably no one else really to mention. For the Carlton Blues, Savani was named if you're keen on him. Holland's obviously in the back line as expected. Walsh was named after having a pretty lackluster preseason, so that could mean the likes of Achera could be pushed out in the wing a little bit more, but he is named on as a follower, so that probably gives you a bit of confidence. Temporarily named on the field as the mainstay winger is also quite impressive, and obviously gives you a bit of confidence in picking him, with Doherty on the wing to be that sort of rotation for the wings with Atkins and Camperelli there. Nick Haynes, if you're keen on him at that elevated price tag, is named on the bench, so it probably doesn't give you as much confidence that he's guaranteed to be best 22, but for now he is. So yeah, but that's the teams. In terms of the fixture, I think we all know what the fixture is by now. We've had 3 months to look at the preseason to look at it, but my captain options for this week, not really looking at anyone for the Hawks game. Looking at round one, not the other round. If you're bullish on the Tom De Koning, then you could put a VC option on him, but I'm probably not looking there. Maybe a Chera, again, if you're bullish, but I'm not super confident with that. If you're starting with a Walsh after his poor preseason, that's definitely one I could be looking at. Not really looking at anyone in this game. Against the Saturday game with Geelong and Fremantle, I could see Brayshaw or Sarong definitely having a pretty good game there. So either one of them could be a good captain option. I'm probably leaning more to the likes of Sarong in that game, just because I think he's shown a bit more in the preseason. Not looking at anyone against with Sydney and the Lions. Both of them are quite restrictive. In the Western Bulldogs and North game, I could see Caleb Daniel having a pretty good game, but it's pretty speculative to be putting the C on him instantly, just with his lower price tag. If you're going with an Ed Richards or a Tim English, then definitely you could go there. But obviously the Cherry is probably the main captain option there for us. Rosie could potentially be a option as a captain option against Collingwood. I don't mind that one there. Obviously, we've seen what Callaghan was able to do against them last week. That went pretty well. Dawson against St Kilda. Probably not looking at McRae just yet. I want to see what he can do consistently there. So probably not what I'm looking at. Gawn against Keefe. Absolutely should be 150 incoming. So if you're starting Gawn, I don't think you look anywhere else. And then finally, Noah Anderson can go really well against the Eagles. So my top 5 captains for this week is pretty obvious. Is Max Gawn at number 1. I think that's pretty much a 130 to 150 pretty much locked in. Then I've gone Cherry. I think this is probably a 120 walk-up against English. Hopefully he can push a lot closer to that 130 against him there. Number 3, I have gone with the likes of Jordan Dawson against St Kilda. I just think they are a bit of a rebel at the moment. I think he can get off to a bit of a flyer. Number 3, I have gone with the likes of Caleb Sarong against Geelong. I just don't think I think he's had a great preseason, and I think he can do very well there. We obviously know the points they give up to the midfield, so he should be very good and get plenty of touches in there. And then the final one I've gone with is probably a bit more speculative, and it is Sam Walsh. And that's purely based on what he's done in the last couple of seasons. He's obviously had injury concerns, but every single time he's come back from an injury, he has absolutely killed it in round 1 in that opening game for him. And he's always had nice matchup, and there's no better matchup than the Tigers, so he should absolutely rack it up in this game. So I guess some of the guys that I haven't touched on is obviously Harry Sheasel. He could go quite well. Dacos, if you shouldn't be starting Dacos to begin with, especially at his very high break even. Whitfield, I wouldn't be touching. He's got a high break even as well. Patrick Cripps, I couldn't go there, but he is the main guy in the midfield. But yeah, there's plenty of options to start the season. Noah Anderson, I would be a bit more bullish on if it was at their People's First Stadium, but because it is away, his average is much lower away from home, so it would have to break the pattern for him to be a much better pick. So that is my captain options, and that is my preview for round 0. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed the team reveal. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed all the preseason content I've put out on my YouTube channel, and hopefully it's provided something for you throughout the season. But best of luck for the season opener. Hopefully you're as excited as I am to get this season underway and be able to just put the feet up, let all the research do the talking, and then we can evaluate how we went next week. So I guess a quick summary of what the channel is going to look like starting next week. I think I'm going to be doing 3 videos each week, which will be a team review, so just reviewing my team, what I'm looking at doing, how it went, +3, -3, all that sort of stuff. Then I'll be doing trade talk. It'll be a bit of a longer episode, really just talking through all the trade options that you should be looking at this week, who you should be trading out, who should be trading in, and looking down the line, who is potentially to move on and whatnot. And then finally, I'll be dropping a captain's video every single week, just providing my top 5 captains throughout the season. So hopefully you're keen for that. Hopefully you are subscribed. If not, please leave a like and subscribe on this channel. And hopefully you're keen to see the rewards to come through. And besides that, enjoy round 1. I'll see you guys next week. See ya.